Good afternoon. Welcome to YourTown. I'm Thomas Hood, your host. Today we're going to take a little bit different direction, and we're going to focus on one community here in the peninsula that we all know well. We hope that our interviews today will tell you a little bit more about what's going on. We're going to be speaking with people both on the management side and on the not-for-profit side that address community, advocacy about education and history, and how all the nuts and bolts fit together for Carmel by the Sea. I'd like you to meet my first guest today, Chip Rerig, Chief Administrator for the City of Carmel. Chip, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Thomas.
Glad you could carve it out of your schedule for a solid 18 minutes.
Wouldn't have missed it.
Chip, from your background, where you originally started off as an undergrad in architecture, and somewhere along the line, you decided instead of being bent over a drawing board that you would get into public life. And I'm curious, after San Luis Obispo, you came to Carmel. Tell us about that shift and what that meant for you for your career.
You know, it was during the kind of the boom time in construction, and I always thought that I'd work for a developer I believed in, or an architectural firm, or a affordable housing firm, or something like that. And my wife was at Stanford up here at Hopkins, and she said, "There's a public planning job, land use planning job in Carmel by the Sea. You should apply for it." And of course, my original thought was, isn't Eastwood mayor? And of course, that's a sore joke because he was mayor a decade before that. And so I came up and I applied, and what I found is I really kind of have a penchant for helping people in the public, and public service was a calling that I never realized was there for me, but it was embraced, and ever since then, for the last 2 decades, I've been a public servant, something I very much enjoy.
So you don't miss the all-nighters and all the other stuff the rest of us go through?
Well, we still have all-nighters. We still have all-nighters. They're just in public, and they're also
behind
taped.
the microphone.
Correct.
So you started off in Carmel as a city planner.
Yes, sir.
Then you moved over to Monterey. Tell us what that was like to moving from one community to another.
Very similar issues. I mean, coastal issues, state lands issues. Dealing with character management, both Carmel by the Sea and Monterey are very concerned about maintaining the character of their cities, not just the built environment, not just the architecture and the quality of the architecture, but the natural amenities, the beach and the dunes, the dune habitat, the forest, the trees. All those are elements that are very, very similar and very important to both communities, as well as historic preservation, obviously, a very important aspect in both communities.
Well, from my perspective, and this may be slightly skewed because I have only been here a dozen years, but to me, the Monterey's history was as much governed by not only historic events, the founding of California, but also industry, the fishing industry.
Yes, sir.
Right, and that legacy still has an impact on the whole commercial district. Carmel, on the other side, as it says right behind your, on the dais, that it was founded as a primarily residential community.
Correct.
Coming back to Carmel after serving in Monterey, tell us a little bit about that shift, what that really means as a residential community, as an administrator.
It's again, and my friends on the Carmel Residents Association will punch me in the arm when they see me, but it is a balance, because the residents are afforded a level of benefits in a 1 square mile, 4,000 person city that are not afforded in other communities that don't have the financial wherewithal, quite frankly, and a lot of that financial. Give me an example of what that means. The example is that we'll bring in with transit occupancy tax, which is the hotel tax, and the sales tax, people visiting and buying things in our village, which makes up well over 2/3 of our overall budget. So the other third being the property taxes, but again. If you were in Montessorino or Piedmont, where again you had a high property tax value, and you didn't have the commercial entities, you again still wouldn't have a full-time ambulance force, a full-time fire force, or a full-time police force. So again, the level of benefits afforded to my village are amplified because of the health of our commercial district.
So the relationship between the residents and the business owners. There's a hand that you don't want to bite that's sort of feeding you.
You don't want to bite it. The big thing is you want to have people that visit our community appreciate the community. The CRA recently did a sustainable tourism seminar, where again is how do you work with our marketing partners, work with our Chamber of Commerce, work with the different travel groups, that when they come to the village, they it's not all taking pictures and walking in people's private property and walking where they shouldn't be walking and doing things that disrespect the community, using our garbage and our recycling cans. And not taking it as if it's some kind of a Disneyland, because it's not. People live there. This is where they live and they work and they raise their children.
What I think is remarkable, unique, and one of the reasons that I settled in Carmel was the fact that it's founding words as a residential community.
Correct.
Because essentially those are the people that participate in community affairs. They make the wheels turn in terms of the whole social interaction. And let's face it, we can think of 1,000 places that can be anywhere in the United States that don't have that clear, defined character that Devendorf started when he was selling lots for $500, and he'd bring over trees and stick them in the ground and say, "We're going to have a wooded community." I mean, it's remarkable foresight, and preserving that I think is absolutely essential, because that's the draw to Carmel. What do you got? You got the beach, downtown, the character. Right, the character of that scale of that community.
It's those natural amenities. I agree with you. And people always say the beach, but we've got a lot of other natural amenities. We have an area in the Dune Habitat, which is, or has been in the past. You talk to people who grew up here not that long ago, and the dunes were pristine. The sugar was like, the sand was like sugar. It was that fine and that white and that beautiful. Our nature preserve, the Mission Trails Nature Preserve, is an amazing 34-acre parcel that the city owns that has obviously trails in it, part of the name, but it's an amazing confluence of habitats where you've got some riparian habitat and you've got some upland habitat. It has the last vestige of meadow, of native habitat meadow we have on the Central Coast. So it's called Martin Meadow, and this time of year you see Hickman's onion and every other amazing native flower that were indigenous to this area growing. And so again, it's maintaining that property and encouraging people to explore it very civilly. That is part of my calling.
You don't sound like a city administrator when you start talking about native plants.
Well, it's part of our city. It's part of our village. That's what's important.
That's absolutely fabulous. Okay, so now you're in budget season.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Tell us about the process and what's going on and how does that tie into some of the things you've just mentioned?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a very organic process, so it's a very public process. So what we do is we draft a budget, and all in. Our total budget is about $24 million. The general fund, which again, most of the money comes from property tax, sales tax, and hospitality or hotel tax, amounts to about $20 million. So we present that to the council with a bunch of budget recommendations that we have them. So we're going to spend a certain amount of money on asphalt and concrete, and again, the forest and the beach. And the council goes through a very iterative process, working with the public in public meetings to say what's important to you. So we produce a capital improvement plan on an annual basis, and we produce an operating budget, and then we want the community and the council to ask questions. Why are you spending on this but not this? And it's our responsibility to give them answers to that. So we began the process about a month ago with the CIP, our capital improvement budget, and this is again for what I would say are, again, flat work, so asphalt and concrete, the built environment, so our buildings, and then technology, because technology in the city has been sorely lacking, quite frankly. I had a 80s era telephone in my office until recently, but we need to update those systems. So
on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the condition of Carmel's infrastructure? Would you rate it a 9, meaning it's really good? Or?
No, sir. I'd say it's about a 7 right now.
That's pretty good for a 100-year-old community.
It's not too bad. Again, the past councils have paid attention to it. 6.5 or a 7. The benefit that we have right now is we have Measure D, which is a 10-year 1% sales tax. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take, and that'll glean us about $2.8–3 million a year. We're trying to orient all of that money into capital infrastructure. So we're trying to pump it back into the community, again, both in the residential neighborhoods as well as the commercial core.
What's the biggest challenge with the commercial business district that you see? Obviously, growing from you were about 16 million in 2004, 2005. Now you're at 24 million, a 50% increase in budget. The business district hasn't grown by 50%. Is that increase in budget really as a result of a strong economy, TOT?
No, I would
happening?
say that sales tax is anemic, and what we saw is what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a correction. We're seeing we call it a George Bush 1, so the first George Bush recession of 1990, 91, 92, and so we're looking at about a 2% correction on sales tax. What's keeping us afloat is the meal tax, so the tax that you pay when you go to a restaurant. But to answer your question directly. Sales in the village are having difficulty competing with online shopping, and with brick and mortar buildings are a lot more expensive than if you have a virtual store somewhere. So really, the challenge is encouraging property owners and business owners to keep their businesses fresh, to work with the city about facade improvements and remodels, to work with us on right-of-way. I mean, how can we work together to improve the sidewalks, or do some plantings in the front in the tree wells? So that's a conversation that we have going on with the chamber and its members as well.
So the health of the residential component of town, which is that's their foundation, coupled with the business district. If the business district starts to lag in terms of competitiveness against online, or visitorship drops, it goes right to the bottom line of the city budget, and it affects everybody.
It does. It absolutely does. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that Ordinance 96, which is our Constitution, says that the village is primarily and essentially a residential community. So we're always looking at how we can not just maintain the quality of lives of the residents, but improve them. So again, acting as a buffer between the more intensive uses of the commercial district and the less intensive uses of the residential district, that's when my staff steps in and tries to help mediate, ensuring that, again, there aren't noise impacts, there aren't visitor impacts, there aren't parking impacts, there aren't excessive trip travel impacts is part of what we do.
Well, one of the things that came up recently that was at a recent meeting that came from the governor's office was the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And what I'd like to talk about a little bit is you've got a defined community, 1 square mile, 4,000 residents, which means probably 40% of the buildings are vacant. Does the city ever worry about the fact that it in maintaining its unique character, that it becomes more and more exclusive to those very few? And with this accessory dwelling unit ordinance passed, no one likes to hear about affordable housing, but the fact is there's nothing affordable in Carmel. How is this ordinance going to affect some change that could benefit people?
I think that it will enable people to legally have places to live for their caregivers. Again, the gardeners who come and maintain these properties, the folks who work in the retail shops, the people who change the bedding in the hotels, don't live in the community. I'm hoping that it'll provide an opportunity for some more affordable housing in the community, and that's the state's objective. Is to provide some more affordable housing opportunities. And these are going to be small, obviously, in our community, where the average lot size is 4,000 square feet. Well, the maximum house you can have is 1,600 square feet, which includes a 200 square foot garage. But again, I'm hoping that it provides some additional housing opportunities for people. We used to joke that if every person who owned a property in Carmel moved there, we'd have a whole different challenge, because again, the population would basically double.
How would town look? Town's the same size as it was 20 years ago. And before I came here, I understand that it used to be about 80% residents. And if you look at the population today, approximately 4,000, that's about what it was back in 1950. Well, what's changed about Carmel since 1950 that supports community?
What's changed that supports? I would say a lot of the vacant lots have been filled in. A lot of the houses that were on multiple parcels have been demolished and built out. I think there's still a real strong sense of community, though, and if you look at, again, groups like Yes for Carmel, the Carmel Residents Association, the beach cleanups that they have, one of your next guests, the Carmel Foundation, a lot of nonprofits, the American Red Cross. The Monterey chapter is housed in Carmel. A lot of groups, and a lot of groups that are city support groups. Friends of Sunset Center, Friends of the Mission Trail Nature Preserve, a lot of people who, again, grew up here, and some who didn't, but then are giving back. Chuck, who's running this program, he and his wife grew up here. Chuck's new to the area, but they have taken it upon themselves to educate people about visiting our beach and not trashing the beach. His wife is involved outside the city, but at Monastery Beach, where unfortunately people have died because of drowning. So you have this really incredible sense of community, and with that, in Carmel, has come a sense of responsibility to get involved and stay involved. And I think that's one of the hearts of that really make the community.
I'm wondering if that really goes all the way back to what Devendorf and Powers were trying to create, was this unique community, which at this point is a global brand. And, keeping an eye on what the prize was, which was this wooded residential community that always has had tourism.
Yeah.
Going back to its founding.
Yeah.
It's an essential component to its economic vitality. You have to walk this careful line that you don't become a victim of your own success, because it's working so well in its present case, but funding for events or funding for community repairs and infrastructure has to be an increasingly challenging project.
It absolutely is, and again, it's really working with people. I mean, we don't want what some people would call quality visitors. It is an open community where we welcome all. The fact is that we just need to ensure that people respect the community, and that they don't again take advantage of it as if it were an amusement park, because it's not.
That's
and
exactly the word I was thinking.
It's not that, and it's again where people live and they work and they raise their families. And again, if you talk to people, if you sit down on a bench, invariably you're going to meet someone who grew up there. And the stories that they can tell you about growing up in the community. There are three other ladies except for my wife that I court. Mayor Townsend, Charlotte Townsend, who's in her mid-90s now. She was mayor.
Right.
Barbara Livingston, who was a council member, again grew up there, and Sue McLeod, who was mayor and council member before that. All these ladies grew up in this village. They love the village with all their hearts. One of them drinks dry Chardonnay, one of them drinks rosé, and one of them drinks coffee. And I pay homage to them because I want their feedback.
Now, there's a city administrator with the pulse on what the people.
Well, part of my job is working with the community, while at the same time trying to rebuild my city team. The city team was kind of devastated over the last decade, so part of what the council has me doing, because I believe in it, and this is what we should be doing, is rebuilding our intellectual property, making sure I've got the right personnel in the right seats so they can best serve the community.
Well, it's
and that's
been
the residential
great
and commercial.
having you here. This has been fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Chip,
I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much.
All right.
This has been really good. Okay, and then we'll just
fun.
keep talking as I go off camera.
Yeah, great.
So you've got a great job.
I love it.